morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out on this beautiful day to our Southampton Village Comprehensive Master Plan work session, a public meeting here. This is a culmination of months of hard work by our steering committee, our planning commission, some of our land use boards, concerned and valuable residents. We have today a few people I want to quickly thank. We have Frank Fish and his team from BFJ Planning, which is actually the planning firm that did our master plan 20 years ago. So there is some continuity in the process. We wanted to thank Bill Manger, who's the chair of our steering committee, as well as Eldon Scott and Jane Clare, who are here today. Mark Schaffer, who's co-chair of our planning commission, and a whole host of other people, Paul Travis, who's the former chair of the planning commission. And it's incredibly important that everyone's here today because your input is extremely valuable, and your input today will help craft our comprehensive master plan, which of course, as you know, is the blueprint for our village moving forward. Once we craft our master plan and have that blueprint, then our board of trustees can get to work and actually try to start implementing those changes and that vision that you guys will help put forward today. So without further ado, I will actually turn this over to Frank Fish, if that's all right, Bill. Frank, again, is the head of BFJ Planning. Great, and then we'll also, anyone else who'd like to speak, will do so. Again, Frank will be monitoring our meeting today, and we'll let him take it from here.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to introduce our team that's been working with the committee, and maybe the committee also introduce themselves. But Noah Levine, who's here, is our principal in charge of this work. I'm a principal, resource principal dealing with zoning, as you can see, and then Taylor Young is our project manager. And the three of us are going to speak. Taylor's going to, I'll hand it to Taylor, and then Noah will go through where we are in the process. And just so you know, some of the committee members, Bill, can I turn it to you to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, Bill Manger. I was actually a village trustee when we worked with BFJ just over 20 years ago and put together the master plan. And so because we're doing the update of this comprehensive plan for the village of Southampton, the mayor asked me if I would chair the steering committee. So we put together a steering committee to help work with the consultants BFJ through this process, and it's now been going on for several months. In the fall, we had a virtual town hall, if you will, that some of you participated in, and now this is the opportunity to be here in person to also see how the plan is coming along, and for you to be able to participate and give your feedback and input. We will have breakout sessions after we run through these slides, and then we will come back into this room also for a readout of that, and then have a public comment period where individuals will be given 3 minutes to speak about the topics that they would like to address. But I'm going to turn it over here to Eldon Scott to introduce himself, and then to Jane Clare.
Hi, I'm Eldon Scott. I'm a resident. I was formerly on the Planning Commission for I think 10 years or so, and it took all of that time to even begin to understand the zoning, which can be complex. So I think this process is really good for people to understand more about how these regulations formulate land use. I used to work in the Department of City Planning my early career, and I also worked as a planner in London as well as in Nantucket. So it's been very interesting for me to see different places in the world, in the country, and how that relates to what we do here. It's a lot of the same issues when it comes down to it, but every place is unique, and every community has to find its own land use.
Hi, Jane Clare, local resident. I'm also on the planning board, and I'm learning. It does take a long time to get up to speed as to what's going on with the rules and regulations. And I was a special ed teacher at Southampton schools, and one of my mantras was that in order to accept change, that it was going to be inevitable, that growth was optional. And I feel like that's what I'm applying here to this process with the village, because we really need to keep an open mind. Yes, change is going to, there's nothing we can do about that iPhone. But as we go forward, let's plan for the future.
Thank you. So you can see the committee members, and then today's presentation this morning's, I should say. Sorry, this morning's presentation. We weren't sure if this was going to be on a Thursday night or Saturday morning. I'm glad it's Saturday. But at any rate, we hope to do our presentation within 40 minutes, so we're going to try to move along. But I just wanted to say I'll try to cover what is the comprehensive plan update. We're going to get into the planning process with Taylor and the timeline, and then the main part of this presentation with Noah on key issues. After that, we're hoping to do a breakout group, which I'll explain at the end of this, a set of breakout groups. We're all set up for different rooms here. And then I just want to mention item 4. You've just met the committee, or a good part of our committee. And when you do a comprehensive plan in New York State, state law is very specific. It's just a sentence that says, if a committee is established, it must hold its own public hearing session during the development of the plan. Those are the words. So this is the committee's hearing. The plan is not finished. The plan won't until it goes to the trustees, and then the trustees will hold the larger public compliance with the State Environmental Quality Review Act. So this is an interim hearing by the committee on where we are in the plan right now. So what is it? A state law again says you need to do a comprehensive plan. It needs to include the whole village and present a future for the village. And it serves as the basis for zoning, capital budget implementation. And particularly there's some law cases out there that say zoning ought to be based upon a well-reasoned plan. Hopefully this will be, with your input, a well-reasoned plan. So the next slide goes over the comprehensive plan chapters. These chapters are not mandated by state law, but they're suggested. And where we got the 8 of them is really from the current comprehensive plan, which was done some 20 years ago. And actually, I was very happy at that point. I was in Noah's shoes. We had a principal by the name of Paul Buckhurst, who's now emeritus in our firm, doing that plan 20 years ago. It had many of these. It had almost all of these chapters in it. But the 8th chapter, we're going to not only have a future land use plan, but actual zoning recommendations. They are not done yet because we're working on these other chapters right now, which we're going to summarize for you today. And then why update the plan now? Well, a lot of changes since the last plan was done. We've got increased growth of the second homes. We've had all the changes during COVID. And then what the New York Times called, I had not seen this reference before, continued growth as co-primary market. What the Times meant by that was people who had homes here that were really just seasonal. Some of them during COVID moved out here. I'm not telling you anything that you already don't know. But it's been a change that there may be some lasting remnants to it. So it's a big difference since the plan done 20 years ago. Teardowns remains. Concerns about overdevelopment is very similar to what we had 20 years ago. We're trying to get at that. And then some of the loss of workforce housing. So then you've got these issues still remain the same on traffic congestion. However, what's different, we feel, is what's happened to retail, and it's happened everywhere we're working in the Northeast, in fact, the country. As you know, I call it the Amazon effect, but retail is not expanding, let's put it that way. And then also, very different from 20 years ago, is after these storms like Sandy, you can see the effects of it there in the brown and some of the coastal area. Really, there needs to be an emphasis in the plan that was not there 20 years ago on resiliency and coastal climate change issues. So this next slide then just goes into the planning process. I'm just going to highlight this first one and then turn it over to Taylor. On community engagement, we've been, since we've begun the process, which many of you know, we had our first workshop, which Taylor's going to cover. We did that online, We did that through Zoom meeting. And this, we also did a public survey as part of that. And we've done a lot of interviews, just individual interviews like the building inspector. And I want to acknowledge your new planner, Alex Wallach. We had a couple of meetings with Alec. Alec's going to participate in this later today. And so out of those, this is the second public workshop of the committee. It's also the committee's hearing, as I mentioned. And after this, we will then do the draft comprehensive plan in terms of the final issues and getting that by, we hope, maybe in May, to the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees is the one who has final say on the plan. And we're very pleased that 2 trustees are on the committee, because then they're very familiar with the plan. They're reporting it back to the rest of the Board of Trustees. And then when the Board of Trustees has their hearing, we hope in June, they will also be in compliance with the state's Environmental Law Review Act. We're hoping that this plan, with your input, will be a plan that's beneficial to the village. And if it is, then there's no environmental impact statement needed, and the trustees, after their public hearing and any final revisions as a result of your input at the June public hearing, any revisions they make, they would be in a position, if they choose in the summer, fall, to adopt an updated plan. So with that, I'm going to give it to Taylor.
Good morning, everyone. As Frank mentioned, my name is Taylor Young. I'm just going to highlight some of our community engagement updates. So you see here in the yellow, today, this morning, this is our second public workshop. We're not done with the process, as Frank's been mentioning. We're going to have another committee meeting, and then the Board of Trustees meeting, and then finally a public hearing with the Board of Trustees. You can see earlier in our process, we did stakeholder interviews. They kind of continued beyond this October to December timeline here, and then we did have a public survey back between October and December. So just a quick summary of the public workshop, which was held, it was via Zoom back in late October. We had 60 attendees, and some of this is the common themes. Everyone that attended, I would imagine it speaks for a lot of the village. Historic preservation is very important. People supported expanding in historic districts. Residential development, there's a lot of concerns about tear downs and kind of maxing out what people are permitted to build. People were wondering what's going to happen with Southampton Hospital. This discussion that the hospital could move in the future. So what's going to happen with that site? What is the best use of that land if the hospital moves in the future? Workforce housing, a lot of people have said it's hard to find folks to work in businesses. It's hard to find kind of an entry-level home for young people and working people. What are some things we can do? A lot of people talk about the need for safe sidewalks. And I remember someone in my breakout group said, my favorite thing about Southampton is walking around and seeing my neighbors. I love walking my dog. But sometimes I feel unsafe because of how the streets are designed, how fast drivers are going. So what are some things we can do to make sure everyone feels safe when they walk? Environmental issues are a huge thing we heard about. Just heard this morning about another, lots being clear cut without concern of large trees that have been around. What are some ways we can consider the environment, promote better environmental practices while allowing development? And then infrastructure, big support for a sewer system in the village center. We see that as a real lifeline for businesses and a way to expand some housing opportunities downtown. So I had an online survey also done. As you see, about 260 responses received. 82% were from village residents. The remainder would be people who lived nearby in the town who maybe had a seasonal home. But about 4% of village residents, which it sounds low, but that's actually a pretty high survey response rate that we find. So it's pretty impressive on our end. And then on the ideas wall, which was part of the survey, we had 104 open-ended comments. So pretty good interactions, and a summary is posted on the project's website, on the village's website, on the project kind of subheading. As part of this plan, we just wanted to highlight some studies that have been done recently that we studied, have incorporated some of their recommendations. A key one being the Southampton Village Center photo you see here. But this is a comprehensive plan update. A lot of the bones of the comprehensive plan in 2000 still apply. Frank highlighted the need for updating the things that we're thinking that are different. But the Village Center Architectural and Design Guidelines, that's the photo there on the right. And then there was a big planning and zoning report done by Studio AV in 2016 that was kind of a precursor, laid a lot of our groundwork for these zoning issues that we're seeing. And so it's been a huge resource for us. Other ones, coastal erosion management studies, sewer system feasibility studies, the FEMA, elevation zoning heights, and then the management plan, of course, for Lake Agawam. This is just a portion. There's been much more that we've been reading and studying up on to prepare for this plan. And so these are some of the guiding principles we're thinking of. These were formed by speaking with the committee and in our first public meeting and then with the public survey. We want to preserve and enhance the quality of life elements, meaning open space, the natural environment, historic character, and village-scale buildings here in Southampton. We want to focus on the needs and communal aspirations of village residents rather than just on the needs of out-of-town visitors and tourists. And there's going to be a balance, but we want to focus on what year-round residents, the locals here in Southampton need. And for transportation, we want to balance the needs of pedestrian and automobile users in the downtown, specifically, but also throughout the village. In the village center, we want to retain and enhance a human scale to the buildings, streets, and open spaces. People love the human scale buildings right now in the village center, and that's what makes Southampton unique. How can we retain and promote that in the future? We want to promote sustainable patterns of development and incorporate strategies to address climate change and adapt to potential impacts. All right, with that, I'm going to pass it to Noah for a general overview of our draft preliminary recommendations.
Thanks, Taylor. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of the ideas that we've been formulating throughout this process. As Taylor mentioned, the input was really from a lot of different places. From you all, through the workshops, the survey, from the steering committee, from prior reports. What we have here is kind of a taste of the recommendations. There are a lot of things that we'd like to talk about, and it's difficult to go into any one topic in too much detail, so we're happy to discuss those, particularly in the roundtable groups. There will be a moderator at each table that is fully capable of kind of talking about whatever issue you may wish to address. But first of all, on a personal note, I just wanted to say, my family lives in the town of Southampton. It's a community that I grew up in and feel strongly about, so it's extra special for me as a planner to be working here. So just wanted to say that. But to get started, first topic is housing in residential neighborhoods. Some of you, I see some of you out there that were at the film showing last night for One Big Home, which touched upon a lot of the same themes that the village is seeing. And largely the concern about tear downs and overbuilt homes, which impact the community character here. And this is happening both large properties on some of the larger lot zoning areas, as well as the smaller lots where property owners are looking to basically max out the building envelope. In addition to the building itself, the zoning right now we feel is a little bit permissive when it comes to allowing a property to be overpaved, and so we need to retain some of that greenscape. And so things that we're looking to do are tweaks to the zoning code. I think a lot of larger changes have been made in the last decade to reduce the maximum scale of what how buildings can be built. But there could be some tweaks to side yard setbacks, particularly in the smaller lot sizes, just to give a little more space between buildings. Hopefully maintain green areas between buildings. Also increase the green coverage requirements, so making sure that areas that aren't built maintain a greenscape, lawns, trees, landscaping, etc. As well as a tree preservation ordinance. I know how sad it makes us all feel when you see a large mature tree cut down, and there are things that we can put into the building code to prevent that from occurring. The trees need to be documented. Trees over a certain caliper size should be preserved. So that's certainly something that the village can do. With regard to historic areas, we have this in the housing section, but it's also kind of a community resource. We've heard that it's, how important it is to preserve historic sites and districts and provide incentives for the preservation of older buildings. And so one recommendation is the consideration of an expansion of the historic district. We've received from the community contributing buildings. You can see some areas in red here. They're outlined that could be potential expansions to the historic district. So that's something that we're looking at and include as a recommendation in the plan. Also, we would like to look at other protections for contributing buildings that are outside of the historic district. So what can be done to preserve those buildings? And then also, while there are architectural guidelines for the historic district, we found that they aren't well publicized or utilized. So first, those guidelines can be updated, and second, they can be better incorporated into the site planning process. With regard to workforce housing, affordable housing, we recognize that this is a need in the village, in the town, and throughout the East End. So there really is the need for diversity of housing types, not just affordable housing, also age-restricted housing, so people who are aging can stay within the community and aren't forced to leave. So we're looking at opportunities and locations where those types of housing might be appropriate. Potentially areas along North Sea Road and some of the office corridors, potentially along Route 39. So these are things that we're looking at. Also, when thinking about workforce housing, we think it might be a good idea for the village to require a percentage set aside in any multifamily buildings. So let's just say 10% or higher. This is really something that the village should think about. I believe the town has a minimum of 20%. But as part of that kind of decision could be made partially as part of this plan, but also we recommend that the village develop its own affordable housing plan so it can affirmatively address this issue and really kind of lay out a framework for how it wants to address it. We've also heard a number of quality of life issues associated with summertime activity, such as on-street parking, for example, landscapers parking on the side of the road, making it difficult for joggers and bikers, speeding, particularly on some of those north-south corridors, to beaches, noise pollution, pesticide, and light pollution. We know the village did adopt a Dark Skies initiative and has been enforcing that, so we commend the village on that effort. Also, gas-powered leaf blowers. We also know that this is another issue that the village is looking at. So, of course, enforce these local codes with particular emphasis on those local laws affecting summertime quality of life. And something that we think that the village could look at is ways to better enforce landscapers that are parking on the street, maybe where that might be appropriate, might be inappropriate. We just want to make sure that that safety is ensured because the streets are really a public space where everyone is using those areas, particularly in the summertime when people are going to the beaches. So looking at the village center, we did talk a lot about this in our first public meeting, and one of the things that we heard was that there really was a desire for more commercial uses that will bring activity to the village center area. So it could be restaurants, bars, nightlife, things for kids to do, etc. Also, we heard a desire for stores that serve the year-round population, not just weekenders and people who are here for the summer, as well as more affordable options. We heard a desire for things like shoemakers or shoe repairs, laundromats, and kind of things that serve residents. One of the big things that I just wanted to mention is that the village, the government doesn't necessarily control what can happen in an individual property. You can lay the framework for what could go there and at least set the direction, but there are certain things that zoning can and cannot do. But we do think that there is an opportunity to promote new commercial developments, but a lot of that would probably come if there were to be a sewer district, which is something that the village is looking at in coordination with the county. We're also looking at updating the zoning code, which I'll talk about briefly, but the sewer district really would help to preserve sensitive ecological resources, and it would also allow for slightly higher densities of development and wet uses, such as restaurants that really might have a hard time fitting in, because sewer really seems to be the biggest constraint for those types of uses. This is just a map of the kind of current plan. It hasn't been finalized. There's still some details a lot of details being worked out with regard to financing and where some of the infrastructure would be located, but it has been moving forward. We're also looking at, if development were to occur, where might that be most appropriate? One thing we've heard from everyone, for the most part, is that Job's Lane, Main Street are really precious and shouldn't really be overdeveloped, and you really want to keep the scale of those areas. The map on the right shows kind of Job's Lane in yellow, and where you can see the areas in purple are areas in the historic district. And the historic district does a pretty good job of maintaining those, preserving those properties. Some of the areas that we think are probably most likely to be developed if a sewer district were to happen are areas along Nugent Street and Windmill Lane. I've indicated those in red. Some properties there, the post office, are vacant, and so we could envision there to be some redevelopment in the future. And so if that were to happen, how might we guide that development? The architectural guidelines that were developed in 2013 really laid the foundation. The village adopted many of those regulations. We think that there are some tweaks that we're looking at to really adjust those, provide a little bit more design guidance. One of the things that we do want to do, though, is maintain the scale of Jobs Lane, and so that might be even reducing the allowable height from 35 to 30 feet to kind of prevent, keep it at a low scale. But allowing 38 feet, 3 stories, the areas along Nugent Street and the lane, those areas are a little bit wider and have a slightly different scale. It's noting that I think the allowable height can go up to 40 now, so this isn't an increase so much, but it's just kind of clarifying a little bit on what's in the zoning. And then, as I said before, updating the design guidelines for these areas. With regard to mobility, this is something I'll talk about as a separate issue in a little bit, but we did hear the importance of improving pedestrian connections to the village center, in particular at intersections here. At the top, you see the wide intersection at Main Street and Nugent Lane, and we've heard that can be somewhat problematic. We think that we've heard that the signals might need to be adjusted so that the don't walk signals are coordinated better. So that's something we've heard. Also improving bicycle connectivity and infrastructure. What we're looking at also is focusing on the gaps in the sidewalk network. We've heard about some gaps that have been identified, and then having dedicated bike lanes on Regent Street and Windmill Lane. And again, I'll discuss that later. With regard to parking, one of the strategies we would like to promote is really making better use of the all-street lots. So the lot in the center, the village center, is somewhat underutilized compared to the on-street spaces. And you can better manage those spaces using a variety of techniques. And one is changing the regulations for on-street, really pushing short-term parking to the on-street spaces, whereas longer-term parking to the off-street spaces, providing wayfinding signage. We do know there is some wayfinding signage there, but we have heard that it's hard to find those backlots. One thing we do recommend is the development of a parking management site that will kind of look at these issues in detail. We do also see another opportunity if there were to be some development, let's just say on Nugent Lane or Windmill Lane, those opportunities really better coordinate parking so you don't have independent lots that feel fragmented. So you want to have kind of a coordinated shared system in the village center. For office and medical districts, first to start with the Hampton Road Office District, one of the recommendations that we heard was that there's concern about residential intrusion into this area. A lot of people have been applying for variance to get residential, and those are treated on a case-by-case basis, but we really do want to maintain the kind of commercial office character in those areas close to the village center. So we've identified those areas where we felt that residential really wouldn't be appropriate. We're also looking at the Southampton Hospital site. This is a conversation that I know has been ongoing. Should the hospital move to the Stony Brook Southampton site, what would happen for the future of the site? And so we really want to listen to the community to really have a kind of a framework for what might be appropriate. And it's really interesting to look at the hospital. Here's the main campus. There's also so that's the MD district. There's also the HA, which is hospital accessory on these side roads. And so we're looking at kind of a looking at this area as three kind of separate areas. But you can see in these HA areas, there's parking for the hospital. And so essentially what we heard from the community was that they don't want, the community, surrounding community doesn't want to see something that's out of scale, that's going to kind of really overly infringe on the neighborhood. So development in the HA areas, and those are parking lots that are surrounded by single family homes essentially, should match the residential fabric of the adjacent homes. So if something were to be built there, it wouldn't feel like there was anything different. For the main hospital campus site, the height of the building should match the height of the surrounding areas. But we think that there could be an opportunity to have different development types, such as detached or attached homes, which are essentially townhomes, and hopefully clustered to preserve open space around the outskirts of the site. A lot of that would be done as part of kind of the site plan approval process. Another option would be to consider allowing a multifamily residential district, which is already in the village's zoning code, and that is somewhat similar, but has different provisions. But basically, a developer would have to go to the site plan, to the planning board for site plan approval before getting started on the project, and before receiving that zoning designation. And then lastly, for the other medical district uses, there's a variety of different uses. We would kind of maintain that district. We know that there are a lot of viable office uses. We do think that there is a possibility for some more assisted living, so that might be something to include in that district. But this is our preliminary zoning approach. And we look forward to hearing from you also and discussing this in our breakout groups. With regard to transportation mobility, we do know that there are huge impacts to the seasonal traffic, also just the traffic during the peak hours from people coming in and going from all throughout the South Fork. And a lot of people use the village as a cut through from Route 39 and Montauk Highway. So, through traffic is something that we heard about. This is also something that was addressed in the 2000 plan. It's an issue that we're certainly looking at, but it's difficult to fix. There's no kind of magic wand, but there are certainly things that we can do to slow down roads, to advocate the county for signal improvements along County Route 39. We can implement traffic calming measures to slow down traffic, and then also improve marketing for existing transportation services, such as Suffolk County Transit's new bus service, Long Island Railroad, etc. And then we do know that there is the need for a more comprehensive bicycle network. We started to put pen to paper to think about where that might be accommodated. A lot of the roads in the village are somewhat narrow, so you're limited to what you can do, and we don't want to necessarily widen the roads or kind of infringe on green areas, so we kind of want to work with the area that we have. But we do think that there are some opportunities. One of which, and I'll talk about in a little bit, is the opportunity for bike lanes in the village center. But what our priorities are kind of looking at bicycle routes in the village center, making connections to the train station, and also connections to the beach. So a comprehensive network that really links these important destinations. And one of the features is thinking about a village center loop. You might not be able to fit a bike lane on both sides of First Neck Lane and South Main Street, but you might be able to fit a bike lane on one side and have a sharrow on the other. So if you appropriately designate these areas and have signage, you can make it clear that there could be a southbound bike lane on First Neck Lane, a northbound bike lane on South Main Street that connects to some of these other areas. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail on this. These are just kind of preliminary recommendations, but we look forward to discussing this with you. In the village center, you do have wide roads, you do have space for a bike lane. On Nugent Street, the roads are very wide, you have enough space for a bike lane and a 2-foot buffer. This just kind of shows somewhat what that might look like. And then also on Windmill Lane, you have space within the existing right-of-way to accommodate a bike lane. On Meadow Lane and Gin Lane, it's a tough nut to crack. You have a narrow road and you have a lot of bikers and a lot of joggers. This is something you can see on any summer day or any winter day. I was driving out there yesterday and I saw a lot of people biking. And it's a safety issue that we want to address. The question is, how do you do it? One way, the simplest way, is to put sharrows down on the road. Sharrows are just pavement markings, which basically just indicate to the driver that they should be aware that the road isn't just for motorists. Another opportunity is something that some communities are trying. It's called a suggestion lane. It basically is one lane of traffic where drivers kind of merge in and out. Drivers would probably use the road in the same way, but it more clearly indicates that they should drive slowly and make way for bicyclists. Another opportunity is an off-street path on the bay side. We recognize that this would be hard to do because of the wetlands and private property owners, but if that could be achieved, that really would be something worth looking to. And so maybe it's worth some further study. I'm going to quickly go through parks. We have heard the importance of maximizing the utility of the existing system of parks, adding to the system as resources and opportunities permit. Some of the opportunities that we see, first on Moses Lane Park, there is a plan for the park, and I know the village is pursuing upgrading the park and kind of continuing those efforts to upgrade the park. Agawam Park, there have been discussions of potentially expanding the park and providing a multi-use trail on Palm Lane, as well as the park at Windmill Lane, and restoring or bringing back either the old windmill or a new windmill, something to kind of mark that historic site, which is where the windmill, which is now on the Stony Brook Southampton campus, that's where it was originally located. With regard to arts and culture, the village really is blessed with the diversity of arts and cultural uses. We know the movie theater has left, and there is an opportunity to fill that space with something that is community-driven. So that's certainly something that we know is in the works. But we think that there's an opportunity to develop an arts and cultural district that's really centered around the Monument Park, on Job's Lane, on Palm Lane, on Hill Street. That really promotes this, either through wayfinding and marketing, but maybe also other types of incentives that we're looking into. And in the zoning, there could be support for galleries and art stores, community-oriented spaces, and perhaps artist studios and residences. Here also another opportunity is to create and promote some of the other resources both within the village center and outside. The village has a tremendous amount of historic assets, with special thanks to Tom Edmonds from the Southampton History Museum for putting together a map of what a heritage trail could look like and what some of those sites along Heritage Trail could look like. We think it's an opportunity to promote these with wayfinding and signage and maybe some marketing materials to let people both in the village and also visitors know how much there is to offer in the village. And environmental sustainability is something that the village is aware of both on a local level with some of the environmental issues that we've seen at Lake Agawam. A lot of work has been done to restore Lake Agawam. A lot of work remains. The village is monitoring this and is continually working with others to upgrade that sensitive resource. Also utilizing CPF funds, county preservation funds, to preserve more open space parcels, and those areas have already been identified, but still need to be implemented. encouraging cluster subdivisions to preserve more open space, adding buffer around water bodies, and providing additional trees and landscaping along streets. We also heard from the Climate Action Committee about other sustainable actions that the village can pursue. So we're looking at those strategies to address climate change, not just from the local level, but thinking about globally what the village can do. So the first thing could be to adopt and implement a climate action plan. Also encourage residents to adopt their own strategies and thinking about what residents can do. And then consider participating in the town of Southampton's Community Choice Aggregation Program, which is basically encouraging the use of renewable energy sources, making community facilities more sustainable, and then perhaps bringing some EV charging stations to the village center to promote that use, but also maybe that might bring people into the village. It might be a driver of activity. Okay, so with that, I'd like to pass it back to Frank just to talk about some of the next steps for this evening, or this morning, and what we're going to do next.
Thanks, Noah. We're at our conclusion now, and I just want to go through one or two more slides, but and Noah, you can move through this. We're going to provide one copy of this for each of you, and Noah, you can move through. You can go for Donkey Days ago, and then to next steps. So what we're going to do is consider the comments you make today, and that also some of you have made on the survey and the first workshop. We're going to try to develop then a draft plan, and basically there's not much left to March, so in April and May we'll be meeting back with our committee, as Taylor mentioned. The committee will eventually send the draft plan to the trustees. Of course, two of the trustees are on the committee, so it's the trustees are informed of this already. And then we hope with the trustees to make revisions to the document through May so that we can then go to a public hearing with all of you and others from the village in June. And then after that hearing, meet with the trustees again to make revisions based on comments that you make or that the public makes, so that we want to make sure that the plan represents your views, your comments today, and also represents the comments at the trustees' public hearing. So that's the overall sort of next steps to this. And then I just wanted to discuss, by the way, Taylor's going to put this presentation that we made today will be all online, but at each breakout group, we'll put a hard copy of this on each table, and I just want to explain those breakout groups a little bit logistically. I think there's about 75 to 80 of us in the room, and we are on schedule. So if we could spend maybe 45 minutes, if we could spend probably 45 minutes in these breakout group discussions, and then come back here and we'll get together here again. We're hoping here you could focus on what was said today, and you'll have hard copies of it on the table, and then tell us, you don't have to limit yourself to the top 3 recommendations of the plan, but what do you think we should be, what's your primary concern, what do you think we should be focusing on? Is there something that we focused on that we don't need to? Give us your feedback in the group. There'll be a moderator, one of us, and there's going to be about 5 breakout rooms, so there'll be one of ours from our team. I want to say that Alex, your planner, will be at one of the tables, and the chair of our committee, Bill, will be at one of the tables also, and if there's a need for other tables upstairs, Eldon's going to be upstairs at one of them. The moderator will take notes, so one of us will be a moderator, take notes, and then we hope in 45 minutes or so to come back here and sort of regroup, if you will. And then finally, when we regroup, the next thing to do here is that if anyone wants to speak or make any comments to the whole group, there'll be a chance to do that too. And Bill will moderate that. We ask at the end that if you could keep any comments to no more than 3 minutes. And the reason for that is just to have us end by 12:15 or 12:30. This gallery has to be available at 1 o'clock outside for gallery purposes, so we need to clean up a little bit by 12:15, 12:30. And I think that'll give us, we'll remain on time for that. So, and then no, I think that's about it in terms of the breakout groups. I wanted to describe those as we break down and take a break. All of the rooms, well, first there's going to be one breakout group here. I mean, we're just going to move these 2 tables here. I'm going to stay here. I'll stay with this group. Whoever wants to come up. The subject matter of discussion is the same at all the groups, but there are literally there's literally 3 rooms out there, and we've got tables all set up in the adjacent building, just flung out the back here, and you'll see those rooms right away. And I mentioned, don't forget, there are upstairs. There's an upstairs here in the building, and in the adjacent building, and there's 2 breakout sessions there. So there's enough to easily accommodate if we're, say 10 to 15 people per table. There's enough easily to accommodate everyone. So we will meet you at those tables. And Bill, anything else that you want to say, or?
No, we'll just have to have an orderly division of everybody here into groups of, again, at least 10, and then proceed to the different tables for the breakout sessions. So a group of at least 10 can stay here, and then everybody else should move to the Veterans Hall, and you'll see the areas there that are set up for different breakout sessions. Thank you.
I couldn't call it my group, on the group I was sitting with. There were many things mentioned, but Job's Lane has mentioned first that not only is the zoning and the height important, but it's an historic district. And so we will cover that in our report. Job's is very important, and particularly it's all important as if a sewer district goes in, the preservation of the area, although the sewer district will help on the one hand tremendously in terms of restaurants or what can happen. It also can be something that would stimulate growth, so we want to make sure that growth is appropriate. There was also just mention of several things on controlling. There's some disagreement on controlling things that we are looking at, and that's height. Side yards, someone mentioned gross floor area, which is GFA, so that felt that the zoning code as it is now is good. The committee is looking at slight tightening, so we heard that comment from that gentleman. And also there was a whole discussion in the sewer district. The mayor was terrific on it, and I'm not going to go into the whole sewer district. Those of you who want more information on it, we'll try to get more information in the plan. But there are some people here in the audience, the mayor included, who can give that sort of detailed opinion. There was a discussion of workforce housing, how it could be incorporated in the village and where. There was a discussion also of solar and the fact that solar is not uniformly viewed, solar panels, as necessarily appropriate. There was mention of Tesla coming out with solar shingles and new technologies. And the emphasis on design guidelines for that. Long discussion of Agawam, I shouldn't say long discussion, good discussion of that, on the Agawam Lake, and the idea that storm water drainage has got to be controlled. It's the main problem that person said. Again, the windmill, that whatever goes back in, and the windmill, it'd be real, it'd be authentic, it'd be historic, and not be a sort of phony windmill. Put it that way.
The Stack Marker windmill is actually from 1960.
Okay. Then we got into a long discussion and a good one. I'm going to call her Mrs. Corrigan from now on. Corrigan Street. And also traffic and what to do about it. Hill Street, the idea of maybe a boulevard, take out the bike lanes. put in a boulevard and put in plantings. And then the hospital made their point. They would like to have maximum flexibility on that site. Obviously, it helps them get a return on the site as they move elsewhere. And there was discussion of that. Discussion of train service, which is a hard one, because we've got to get better train service to get more people to use the train. And then there was a discussion in great detail of what I still call the old parish museum and its landscape plan and how to appropriate that. So they're very good points. I hope I took notes on them. I'm going to hand this to Taylor.
All right. Thank you, Frank. Our group, or the upstairs group as I'll call them, was great. I thought we had a lot of diversity, people who are architects, people on architectural review board, all kinds of folks. And we got some great stories. My favorite was that one person who used to go hunting before school in Southampton and would bring their shotgun, which is so, I can't believe it. But that was linked to, there's not much open space left, but let's preserve what we have and continue to preserve some open space, continue to improve Lake Agawam and the other water bodies. It was a good balance of discussion of the sewer district, discussion of what we need in our community in the future, mixed-use buildings in the village center, we need workforce housing. But something that really struck me was we can't just wait for the future. We've got to think of what we can do now. And even if it's a small step, it's a good step. Let's take steps on our way, hoping for this, and counting on the sewer district that's going to come later and really help out. A lot of balance new architecture with the old scale. Everyone likes the old scale, but recognizing that times change and tastes change, and how can we make sure everything's still in harmony. Traffic on residential streets, is a major issue. People like Southampton because it's the only one in the East End that's off a big highway, so it should be a more quiet village from a traffic perspective. Another thing in general, someone said in our breakout group that said they think a lot of village residents have a broad agreement on the issues and what we need to do, but it's the implementation is where we've got to work things out. I thought that was a good point, that we've got a lot in common, even when it seems like there's questions about how to do it. It's age-restricted housing and aging in place was a big issue. Balancing, individual property rights. That's something I thought was really interesting. Individual property rights as we have through zoning, and then kind of what is the responsibility to the community when a new development comes in. How do we balance what someone wants to do with their own property and then what the community wants? How can we keep younger residents here again? Multi-generational housing. How can we promote that? A big discussion about office districts. What's the future of office uses in Southampton? What is an office? Is it commercial uses? Kind of look into that a little bit more and think about it. People want more vitality in the village center. That could be restaurants, and of course, thinking the sewer district will help with that. But especially on Windmill Lane and that Nugent Street, use that as an opportunity to bring more vitality to the village center. And then kind of, lastly, gift thought to the pedestrian circulation. We ended our discussion with the discussion of Monument Park here, right across from Agawam Park, which is it's got chains out front, literally in front of it. It's that's not inviting you into that green space. So what are some things we can do to invite people into the green space we have and promote walking around our village more? With that, I will pass it out.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the group that I was sitting with for a really robust and great discussion. We had a lot of long time with the residents. It was great to hear their perspective. So we touched on a whole range of issues that I'll try and summarize as best I can. There were concerns expressed about the village's budget and finance and how the tax assessment is done. We talked about trees, the loss of large trees and the need to preserve them for the village's community character. There was concerns about how the utility companies manage trees and the loss of foliage. An idea that maybe some of those utilities could be buried underground as a way to help preserve those trees. We talked about the aesthetics, especially on North Sea Road, and there was a lot of emphasis on the different entrances to the village, one being on Hill Street, on North Sea Road, and also, make sure I got this right, on Hillcrest and Miller Road. The idea is that the entrances to the village there should be special attention paid to those to make sure that they're very attractive. We talked about the idea of branding the area around the theater as an arts district as you enter the village, how that could be a resource as a cultural center. We talked about climate change and how sustainability and resiliency shouldn't be an afterthought, that really all of the plan should be through the lens of those issues. Let's see, we also talked about traffic flow, concern about pedestrian malls and how traffic might get rerouted. We talked a little bit about the Southampton Hospital site. There was a concern that whatever is built there should be cohesive with the village, that the attached homes there kind of fit into the surrounding area. And also if there was a possibility to tie into some of the waste management there. There's concerns about digging up the village for some of the sewer projects, but also that might be an opportunity to maybe bury some of these utility lines that we talked about. We talked a little bit about Stony Brook having vacant dorms, and maybe that's an opportunity for housing, especially by the train station, and have satellite parking. But then that also brought up the issue of how do we address transportation from outside the village into the village and those last mile connections, whether that be train or shuttle or bikes and things like that. And we talked about municipal parking, how the village uses those resources, and making sure that those areas are attractive. I think there was a concern that probably could be improved, and that maybe those areas could be better utilized. And we had an interesting conversation about different parking management strategies, whether that's different parking requirements in the village parking, whether that's metered parking and some of the technology that would allow. We mentioned the idea of reverse angle parking as a potential safety improvement that maybe is worth looking into. We talked about the concern that homes are overbuilt, that also driveways are creating a lot of overpaving, that's creating a lot of open space, especially in regards to the film One Big House that we watched last night. And also the concern that the lack of driveways, that off-street parking is making driving and biking difficult throughout the village. That kind of spoke to the changing community character. There was a concern about the loss of modest and quaint homes that people felt made the village a very desirable thing, and the concern that we're losing what makes the village the most desirable. But also that there's a lack of housing options. We talked about condos the supply being so low, which makes the cost high. And that there's a lack of different types and diversity of housing. And we talked about areas where maybe those could be expanded along, for example, Sea Road, and different entrances to the village. Let's see. We also talked about the new opportunities that could come with the sewer district. We mentioned the hospital already. We also talked about bike lanes, concerns about how those are addressed in some of the downtown streets where we know the width is very narrow. And also streets like Windmill Lane that are very wide, and how we address traffic flow there. We also talked about issues of traffic and dumpsters, trees on commercial properties, and let's see, I think that just about sums up our conversation about a lot of different issues. I think I'll turn it over to Bill.
Thanks, Alex. So, of course, we had a great group as well. And it was a diverse group, some lifetime residents as well as residents that have only been here for a few years. But we tried to distill it into common themes. I would say that one of the common themes was that, again, the village has to be first and foremost for the residents. There was a big topic on quality of life in the village, whether that be noise, and it wasn't only leaf blowers. They talked about helicopters and aircraft that fly over the village, especially during the summer with signage. Obviously light, traffic, the need to calm traffic. Preservation was another huge issue with our group. They want to document and protect the buildings that are historic in the village, and that is including vernacular, traditional buildings that were built in the village 100, 150 years ago. There was a call to expand the historic district and include more structures in that. There was also discussion about enforcement of existing code. The village has a huge code book. Some of you are very familiar with it. And a lot of times some of these quality of life issues arise when we don't have proper enforcement of the code that is already on the books. So that was something that came up. Certainly affordable housing was an issue. That was including age-restrictive housing. We had one member say that, this is a regional issue and that we need to work with the town and the county to try and address affordable housing, that obviously the village can't do it all. And then some more specific comments we got from different participants was, for example, regarding transportation and bus stops. We don't have shelters. So if someone is waiting for a bus, they're standing out there in inclement weather, they said that the village really should do something about trying to have shelters to encourage people to feel comfortable going to use public transportation. Again, there should be more recreational activity for younger people. The village doesn't have a lot of options for younger people. Tree preservation came up. We've heard that numerous times today. There was a call to have more diverse businesses in the village, especially black-owned businesses was a topic that came up. And then, of course, again, just the issue of a variety of housing stock in the village so that there are more options for people, residents, to live in different types of housing in the village. So I think I distilled our group down to a minimum here so we don't take up too much time. I'm going to hand it off. Who's next? Frank.
So that ends our wrap-up session, but what we do want to do so that we comply with state regulation is just to bring this to a close in terms of the workshop portion. So you're welcome to stay, and if anyone feels that we did not cover, the group has not covered something you feel is important, you want to make a comment, we welcome that. And Noah's got a microphone, so he can bring it around to you. I'd like you, Bill's going to moderate this, and then she'll hear Bill say, if you could also, I hope we tried to meet the 3-minute regulation, but if something's been said, you don't have to say it again, but if you do say something, if you could be within 3 minutes, we'd appreciate it. Bill's going to act as the moderator.
Hi, my name is Kelly Dennis. I am a Shinnecock Indian Nation Council of Trustees, governmental representative, councilman secretary. And yeah, I just want to make sure that, we're the neighbors of the village, and that's recognized, the Shinnecock Indian Nation. A lot of our members, I almost every day come down to the village. I gotta check my mail here, and post office is terrible. The parking lot, it's never been good. And also, I gotta have a USPS too, because nothing can be delivered to the reservation almost. And that's virtually no parking, and sometimes I have to run across the street to try to get to that box and almost get hit by somebody. And I just hope that, that's also something that maybe is being looked at as we look at, trying to hopefully increase parking in some areas that make sense. I'm totally for, what's happening with Southampton Hospital and a lot of, the ways that, they're thinking of moving to the campus at Stony Brook, and trying to support that. Shinnecock has a long history working with, I was born there, a lot of us were at Southampton Hospital, and we're grateful for the services that they do with us on the nation territory. I just want to make sure, both culturally, that you don't forget about Shinnecock. We're ingrained here. And this is, our blood here. And this is, Southampton exists because Shinnecock basically made the lines for the town between, here and East Hampton on the other side. So that culturally, make sure that we're still, recognized other than, just on the side of the trash bins with the, shaking the hand of the colonists who kind of came in. And let's see, just, again, we are receiving much in support from the federal government as well as state to figure out a lot of infrastructure issues that we have and have never really been dealt with, at least very much neglected, our own road systems are horrible. It's just bad. So, yeah. But we're hoping that, we're also, in the plans of doing a lot of work, and if there are ways that we can collaborate and perhaps go after grants simultaneously in partnership, please, our doors are open. You're welcome to reach out to me to schedule any meetings.
Thank you very much. There were some people also that signed up ahead of time to speak, so I want to make sure I give them an opportunity. There was a Michael Zinder.
I'll pass.
You'll pass, okay. Ken Wright.
Ken Wright. I'm the chairman of the board of Southampton Hospital Association. And as you know, we're hoping to move to the Stoneburg Southampton campus. We've been serving this community for more than 100 years. As I'm sure all of you know, probably most of you have had to take advantage of our services at one point or another. Our move and repurpose of our existing campus has the potential to address quite a few issues that were spoken about at my little breakaway group. Traffic in the village. We are the largest employer on the east end of Long Island. We have more than 1,500 full-time equivalent positions. The move, and the vast majority of our workforce comes from west of the canal. Our move to the campus will have a significant impact on reducing traffic through the village. Workforce, affordable housing, assisted living and aging in place, on-street parking. These are all things that a repurposed hospital, property, campus, could potentially help ameliorate. Groundwater pollution, we have our own sewage treatment plant. Whatever sort of repurpose happens at our existing campus will not contribute to groundwater or surface water pollution. We have hired RAMSA, which is a noted New York City architecture and planning firm. I have a couple of representatives here today. I've asked them to attend, Jen Stone and Dan Lobitz, as well as Martha Reichert from Tommy Lake and Shea, to help advise us on how we can potentially repurpose our campus efficiently. Well done, a repurpose of our campus could enhance life in Southampton Village. It could be a very positive thing. Any monies that we receive from our property will be reinvested into a state-of-the-art community hospital to serve our community. So I would hope that we are allowed maximum flexibility in the rezoning of our properties to help us maximize our investment, which we would only do in a way that we think is compatible with the village and life in the village. I was, of course, born and raised here as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ken. Jay Fitzpatrick?
I've had my say, thank you.
Okay. Jessica Mazzacappa?
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. That's okay. I just wanted to say that we had a wonderful group. This whole thing has been great. I really enjoyed it. Lots of good ideas, lots of things I hadn't heard before. I think one of the most important factors of this whole master plan going forward is going to be implementation. And I feel like part of the plan should be setting up committees to reach out to other municipalities, villages, and towns on the East End so that we can work together. I think a lot of the workforce housing issues are going to be most easily solved in between villages because of the property values. And I think it's really important that the implementation part be sort of baked into the plan in some way. That's all.
Thank you, Jessica. I had David Runa.
David Rung.
Sorry.
Been a resident of the village for over 20 years, a retired CPA, and I apologize for the people who are in my group that they have to listen to this again. My concerns are primarily financial. The village budget is $33 million. Sag Harbor's budget is $13 million. They provide all the same services. Why is there that difference? I think it behooves the village because all this does is add costs to business and make it more difficult for them to be here. They need to find out how can Sag Harbor provide all those services for $20 million less than what we charge, okay? That's one issue. The second issue is who pays these village taxes? And it is all based on how properties are assessed. And the village has an archaic and opaque system. I would bet none of you here understands the assessed value on your bill. And part of that is because I think the village deliberately deceives you. You have something that says fair market value property on your bill that has no relationship to fair market value. Why does the village deceive us? Okay? But the bottom line of this archaic and obscure system is that the low value properties are paying a disproportionate share of the village taxes. 53 Winding Way pays 6 times more in village taxes than 27 Post Lane. They pay 4 times as much as Robert Kraft does at 40 Meadow Lane. How is that fair? In a society today where we're supposed to care about not having inequities, this village and how it assesses and spreads its cost to everybody is inequitable and not fair, and I think makes the village vulnerable to a class action lawsuit. Thank you.
I would vote to raise Robert Kraft's taxes.
Thank you. Sheila Piper?
I can pass. I brought my climate concerns to everyone's attention. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff Broadley?
Nothing to add, Bill. Thank you.
Okay, then we'll open it up again. That was a list of pre-recorded speakers.
Hi, my name is John Bennett. I live on Hillbrook Street. Just before I get into very quick comments, I have to tell you, every time I hear someone complaining about Southampton Village taxes, I scratch my head. Every time I hear someone complaining about Southampton Village taxes, I scratch my head. You should come into my office where most of my support staff, who live in houses in Brookhaven and other towns west, pay higher taxes by far. By far. The Southampton Village taxes and the Southampton town taxes are by any standard a bargain. And I have owned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties in the village of Southampton, and I gladly pay my taxes. So anybody who's complaining about taxes in the village of Southampton isn't looking at it from a comparative point of view, period. Then I just have some quick questions germane to what we're here for today, which is the master plan update. You have to look very carefully at this constant attempt to lower the GFA, to increase more stringent standards on some of the lots in the smaller districts. It's simply not fair. It doesn't take at all. Zoning is supposed to look at as one of the components of the existing land use and sizes and whatnot. What you really need is design review. All I have to do to prove my point is to have you drive down Post Crossing, and all of those houses are in great violation of existing side yard setbacks, most important, GFA, height restrictions. They're lovely, they're wonderful, because the design of them is so perfect. GFA is not the be-all, end-all, and it's 20 years to keep on winding it down, but you haven't done anything really to affect the sense of place. What you have to do is have more stringent design review. So and again, you get yourself into trouble because when you have neighborhoods that bear no relation to the type of GFA and height limitations and square footage and setbacks that you want to impose, you're holding those people to a higher standard, and you're not doing something that all good planning and zoning says you're supposed to look at the existing development. So I urge you to do that. Just in terms of, I'm trying to be quick, I'm sorry, I don't want to. Just in terms of affordable housing and workforce housing, really, there's one place to do it in the village of Southampton as a part of an overall mixed use That's Southampton, the Southampton Hospital Center. It has an existing wastewater treatment system right across the road. So part of what you're doing with what goes on in that district, it would be a horrible waste of time to rezone it 1 acre, 2 acre, just with single-family residences there. It has huge density landed on the site, and it has a wastewater treatment system ready to go, of course, and be upgraded. So you have to look at that.
John, that's more than 3 minutes.
Oh, thanks, Bill.
We were trying to give everyone an opportunity to speak.
Okay, sure.
Thanks.
Here's your mic.
You're fine. Time.
John, we will have the rest of what you said in the workshop.
Brilliant, thank you.
A comprehensive plan provides the basis for new zoning, as you know. Therefore, a comprehensive plan is meant to reflect the opinions and the preferences of the many constituencies that are part of our village. In my view, well, not in my view, actually, according to opinion research, the procedures used and the design of the research determines the end result. And I think I have seen that vividly here today and previously. I have not been hearing from representatives of Elm Street, Halsey Street, Lewis Street, and so forth. We have a steering committee. I would like to know how many of its members live on any of these local streets, and if they were selected by the people who own the property on those streets to represent their view. I find that as a result of this skewing and our mayor's very tight control over this procedure and system, we don't have a quantified idea of what people really want. We have bicycle lanes on the same level as excessively large houses on small lots, for example, with very little analysis of where the overdevelopment is and what kind it is. Therefore, I'm very concerned. We still have time. There is need for doing what this excellent firm did in May 2000, universal questionnaires, telephone interviews to follow up, and a little less steering from our very efficient mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you. Randall Giannopoulos, and just a tiny request that maybe the village speed limit could be lowered to 25 miles an hour versus 30 throughout the village. I noticed that Hampton Road 25, Gin's 25, Hill Street 25, and yet the side streets are 30.
Yeah.
So, anyhow, small request.
Orson Cummings, thanks very much for all the work. I'm chairman of the board of the Southampton Theater Inc., along with my brother, so I just wanted to let everyone know first that we had our design concept plan completed by Charcoal Blue, who's the preeminent theater designer and renovator in the world right now. So we'd love to share that with you for our vision for what that can do on Hill Street over there as an engine for the village. It seems to fit in so many ways. So we've had movies in the village for 100 years. It can't stop on our watch, but it's also got to be something more. It's a community center, and the vision will explain all that, the design statement. The only other thing I wanted to mention from our group that didn't come up was I thought it's great to have an arts district and have culture be the thing in Southampton Village, but we also need artists who can afford to live here. And I think with the movie theater and the amount of space we have and this conversation about what I call WASO, Western Southampton over there, that some place for artists to have studio space and residences where we can have some artists out here. It would help the neighborhood, and there's a rich history of having artists make great work out here, but it's impossible to be an artist out here now. So maybe we can contribute to that with the district, as well as some other infrastructure needs, potentially like parking and sewer. It's a huge lot back there. So hopefully that will all, we have a lot of work to do to bring it to reality, but we'd love to share the design and we'll keep it moving forward. Thank you.
Can I just give up 1 minute of my unallocated time to you? Could you explain to us what's going on there? Has it been sold yet?
No, that's all still ongoing negotiation with the owner. So without getting into that part, I'll just be brief because we want to wrap up here. But the space would be, first of all, we got our tax exempt status from the IRS recently, so it's a not-for-profit. It would be a bar and restaurant and cinema, but also education programs, as well as a hybrid space that can have some live music and be used throughout the day for coffee and work meetings. It would have Wi-Fi and just a general community space where everyone could be and use, and then it would become in the evenings, obviously, movies and some music, and be very active culturally, and bar. Did I mention bar? Yeah. Bar. So obviously, I'm very excited about it. It's going to be, the renovation substantial. You can't just have a cinema only now. Movies are wonderful, but you need a space that incorporates a lot of other things as well to create flow and make it a sustainable business model. So we've learned a lot about that over the years and visited other sites that have done this. This is not a new thing, but we have this great historic building. It's a landmark building, so we've got to, a lot of people have to step up in the finance department, but we've had some people step up and we're very far along. But we have work to do, but we're very excited. If we can get what we have anywhere close to what was designed by this firm, we'll all be very excited and have a lot of fun.
Thanks for the reminder about the art system. I did write that down. I'm sorry if I forgot to mention it.
No problem. Trust but verify, I think was what I said.
No, I think we're out of time on the question period. It is 12:30, and I'm sorry. Was there, Alan wanted to say something. All right, Alan, it's got to be pretty good.
I have a bad seat because I'm stuck after Warren Hammer on the planning board, so I can't get into thousands of details that every community in New York, especially smaller ones, congeals when they plan, because everybody has something unique to where they are in their road and the other roads. But when planning is tough, and running a plan is tough, Jesse, you're absolutely right. How do you execute this? We can all talk and we vote every once in a while, and that's the only way we really can change it in this type of municipality. We saw a movie last night where 2/3 of the people have to agree. Big issues for us, if you look forward, are going to be how do we recover from the crucial COVID? Everybody has a view. The village is this month as vacant as it's been in 2 years, at least 2 years. It won't be the same as it was in 19. Try to vision, how's it going to be? Those of us with children and grandchildren, are they going to visit anymore? Are they going to work here? What happened? Work is changing in America. If you don't think so, you're probably not informed. It's changing. Will stuff move out here? Will people work 2 days or 3 days? We are still a seasonal community. Everything we talk about is driven by the bifurcation. It's hard to keep track of it. You got to work at it. I've known the reservation well for over 57 years. I deal with them all the time. There's some wonderful people there, and increasingly they're getting a voice that counts. Other than becoming one of the major distributors of marijuana in the United States, their path forward has a lot of bumps and issues, and right next to that hospital. It's an important source. How you change the railroad tracks is expensive, that's why we're here. We're a housing development. We filled in Agawam. For the Dune Church, we studied it for 30 years. First people, I think, that hired Goldberg when he was a baby. We were going to move roads. We had all the trustees of the FNC, everybody would. If you don't drain it for, Mayor, $70 million, so you don't get all the phosphates out that have been there since we stopped being a farming community. All we're talking about is how do you stop it from continuing to pollute from all the runoff. The runoff is higher because we've paved all the runoff. Those are the issues looking forward. You got to make a good estimate. What's the right thing to do to change the course of this ocean liner? If the beach isn't going away, it's narrow and wide. It's not going to go away. In our lifetime, with everybody here, we're not going to have global warming that fundamentally changes the beach. I lived on it for 18 years. I lived out of the village for, 24 years. I was back in the village since then. So for 67 years, I'm an accident, I'm just a good guy. Came up from Philadelphia, this is a better commute. Think forward, what are these issues, how do we respond to where it's going? Thank you.
Alan, thank you, Alan. I gotta cut you off like I did John. All right, well, thank you all very much for participating today. I think this was a very worthwhile morning and now into the afternoon session. Please know that all these comments will be incorporated into the draft plan that BFJ is still working on. It will go through, again, additional iterations. As you heard, it will be presented to the Board of Trustees of the village in a couple of months. They will then have the opportunity to have a public hearing where, again, you can all come and voice your thoughts and opinions on the next iteration of the plan before the Board of Trustees adopts this plan and then moves forward with implementing its recommendations. So there's a little bit more to go, but again, this was a huge step forward today, and I want to appreciate everybody for coming out on a Saturday morning to spend their time to give their thoughts and input into what is a very important plan for the village in the next 10, 20 years. So thank you all very much.